You're listening to JetNation Radio, the official podcast of JetNation.com, the largest independent fan site in the NFL. Be sure to check out our forums and talk all things Jets with thousands of other diehard Jets fans. Now, to get you up to date on all the latest Jets news, notes, and quotes, here are your hosts, Glenn Naughton and Alex Varallo.
Good evening, Jets fans. I am Glenn Naughton. This is JetNation Radio. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I am joined this week by my co-host, Alex Varallo, who, as you know, had some alternative plans the other night when the Jamal Adams trade went down. So, unfortunately, we didn't get to hear Alex's thoughts on the deal. I mean, it's been talked about by Jets fans, football fans across the league. Former players who, it's a good time to pile on the Jets. A lot of, I won't say misinformed opinions, but a lot of the Jets are just kind of an easy target sometimes, and this is one of those times. But what do you think, Alex? We didn't get your opinion the other night. What are your thoughts on the deal?
So I guess the way I should phrase this, and I'm quoting somebody else that I saw the other day. It said, "This team is always about hopes and dreams for the future, but it's never in the here and now." And, just we're back into one of these scenarios again where one of our premium first-round picks have been dealt, and, they won't be, finishing their career out possibly as a Jet. So it sucks, I kind of feel. You know me. I was a huge Jamal Adams fan. I really wanted to see some sort of way that they would work this out. But leading up to the trade, Jamal burned every bridge that was standing between him and the Jets organization. So, and I said earlier, back when this whole thing was going on, if he doesn't want to be here, then we can't have somebody in the locker room that has that negative mentality, because that can carry over and upset people, and that can, just be detrimental to the culture and things like that. So it hurts to lose a player that, is one of the top defenders in the league. When you usually hit on a player like that in the draft, you try to hold on to him, because I think, you want your draft picks, your first round and second round draft picks, to kind of, hit their ceiling as quickly as Jamal Adams did. That's the whole idea behind, putting in the research and grabbing these guys. So, we hit a home run with him, but unfortunately, from October last year with the trade deadline fiasco, that carried a lot of weight, and that tarnished relationship could not be, put back together. So, Jamal's on the Seattle Seahawks now, and we're going forward. From things that I've heard over the last few days, this kid McDougald? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but apparently, a lot of people feel that he could be a starter for a lot of other teams in this league, and he doesn't have the crazy talent and athletic skills possibly as a Jamal Adams, but it seems like we are going to be able to possibly fill that position, right away. And as far as compensation is concerned, I think the trade definitely favors the Jets. Getting 3 premium picks and 2 1s and a 3, that's pretty great. And then having a player that possibly you can just plug right in. Obviously, the Jets did really well with that trade. So bittersweet. Sucks to see Jamal go, but again, you don't want to be here. That's fine. You can go elsewhere, and maybe we'll be able to upset the Seattle Seahawks come week 14. When we play them. I don't know if we're playing them in our house or in theirs. I got to check the schedule on that. But we loved you as a player on this team, but now you're an enemy of the state. So that's just kind of how it's going to go.
Yeah, I think it's in Seattle, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't have that in front of me either. But yeah, I don't. Well, as I said, I've seen quite a bit of negative commentary from the press on this, from the Jets, or about the Jets. A lot of it to me is stuff that is either sort of half truth or just blatantly obvious, or stuff that doesn't really apply, solely to the Jets. What was it I saw earlier? Rodney Harrison saying, "Oh well, now teams aren't going to." That was it. There was two things.
Yeah,
the notion that players won't sign with the Jets now, which I saw. I forget who it was. Someone commented on it, and they made a really good point. And they basically said, how long have the Browns been atrocious? How long were the Raiders absolutely atrocious? And they signed free agents. If the money's there, guys are going to sign. The bigger obstacle, I think, for years for the Jets getting a player was whether or not they had a quarterback, especially if we're talking offensive players. I think that's just again, they're an easy target because they haven't won in forever. But I think if the money is right, guys are going to sign. But I think the thing that bothered me the most was this narrative now that, Joe Douglas is in a bind because now teams know that players know that they can shoot their way out of town. To which my reply is, yeah, certainly. The way you shoot your way out of town is to be good enough to get us 3 premium picks, 2 of them first rounders, and a starting player who plays your position. So yes, you've unlocked the secret. Oh my goodness, what are the Jets going to do now? The word is out. If teams are willing to give up 2 1s, a 3, and a starter in your spot, the Jets will trade you. Who won't trade you? I saw across the board, even people who love Jamal, Colin Cowherd, he's a kind of a clown, but he was a guy who just a couple weeks ago was blasting the Jets for not re-signing Jamal Adams. But even in doing that, what did Colin Cowherd do? He cherry-picked. I watched this segment. He sat there and he said, look at all these players who make $10 million a year or more with the Cleveland Browns, and they still had money to pay Jason Garrett. Or, not Jason Garrett. Myles Garrett. And then he says, and look at the Jets. They only, like 2 guys that make $10 million. That the Jets only have these 2 guys, and they can't sign Jamal Adams. Leaves out the fact that they have 7 or 8 guys making 9 point something. So really, let me know the true salary cap situation if you're going to criticize the team. How about point out the fact that teams, as we've mentioned before, teams are looking at a potential. Well, they've resolved it now. They're saying next year's cap will not dip below 175. But for a lot of this process, it was only rumored that the cap would could drop up to $70 million, which we had talked about. And I got to tell you, Alex, I said I don't know how long ago it was because I feel like Jamal Adams has been a primary topic of conversation every episode now for the past few months. But I remember saying a few weeks ago with all this talk about, Joe Douglas promised this and Joe Douglas said that. And I was just kind of like, have we not considered the fact that Joe Douglas might not mean what he's saying? That Joe Douglas might realize that he has a phenomenal young player, but one who could, again, and he would have been right, one who can net him some significant draft capital and who will be commanding, if the rumors out there are to be believed, he was going to be looking to make, between $17 and $20 million a year. And again, we talk about how Joe Douglas, we're so happy to have him because he spent so many years under Ozzie Newsome. You go back and look at Ozzie Newsome's track record over the last 10, 15, 20 years and see how many times he's taken a safety in the first round. See how many he's taken one of in the top 3 rounds. Like Ozzie Newsome, who Joe Douglas cut his teeth under, didn't prioritize safeties and didn't waste premium draft picks on safeties. And I'd have to go back and look. I haven't looked that up. I don't think he's consistently had safeties, or the top paid safeties in the NFL. Jamal Adams is a great player. I'm not saying he isn't, but I said a few weeks ago that Joe Douglas might just not mean it. From a public you have to protect yourself. What if you're Joe Douglas and you know deep down that you want to trade Jamal Adams because you believe he can bring back some draft capital, and you're wrong, and the phone doesn't ring? You have to put out a front. Openly, you have to say you want the guy because really the alternative isn't all that bad. If you can't trade the guy and you end up re-signing him, you've re-signed a potential Hall of Famer. Like there's no downside, and that's kind of if you remember, Alex, the last time we talked about this, I said I was at the point where I didn't care. I said if they keep him, great. If they move him, great. Because I felt that if Joe Douglas moved him, he was only going to do it if he got adequate compensation, and he ended up getting adequate compensation. So I'm happy with the move. And now, what are your thoughts, Alex, on this? After the trade, this clearly had to have been leaked by the Jets, but Ian Rappaport comes out and says that Jamal Adams, the man who was so mortally wounded by the fact that the Jets answered the phone for that trade call last year from Dallas, may have in fact been orchestrated by Jamal Adams. Rappaport reporting that Adams was texting players on the Dallas Cowboys to tell them to let Jerry Jones know that Dallas was where he wanted to be. He did that. Dallas called to make an offer. The Jets picked up the phone. No trade happened. And so now it appears that all the over-emotional reaction from Jamal, where I don't know if he needed to seek counseling or how serious it got, but it may have very well been over the fact that he didn't get traded. He tried to orchestrate the thing himself, and it didn't go down, so he was going to have to stay with the Jets where he did not want to be. So he puts up this front that, I need a few days, I might need a couple weeks before I'm ready to sit down and talk to the head coach and the GM because my trust has been betrayed, because Bill Belichick would never trade Tom Brady, and I'm on Tom's level. What are your thoughts on Jamal's tweets to the Cowboys players?
That's very interesting because I had heard that, but I didn't get to see anything like write-ups about it or anything like that. And I thought that was something that he was doing, within the last couple of weeks. I didn't realize that was last year's
this
scenario.
is at the deadline.
So, that really, really put, right now, it's like, how can you believe anything that this guy says, about, having being lied to and being insulted and being disrespected, and a man looks me in the eyes and tells me one thing, and then he goes behind my back trying to make a deal, and it's very, very awkward. And I really like hearing that, to be quite honest with you. I feel deceived, quite frankly, and that's for me, being a man of what I think, LOL, having morals, lying is that's like crossing the line for me, and always try to be honest with everything in life, and if you're gonna do stuff like that and you're gonna be deceitful and lie, in today's day and age, you got to be careful what you do and what you say or how you conduct yourself out, in public with today's media and everything like that, because the truth will surface at some point. So really, really, I don't know, it's kind of shady, I guess you could kind of say, of Jamal, because he got a lot of people divided, since this October 2019 scenario. There was a divide of people that said, you know what, the heck with this guy, let him go, trade him. I remember debating with people before the draft, somebody tweeting me saying, enjoy Jamal Adams for the next, 24 hours because tomorrow he's going to be dealt during the draft, and, that didn't happen. And Joe Douglas even said, I think the day of or the day before the draft, that he has no intention of trading any players, but, as he always says, if, someone calls, I'm going to listen. So, and I know this because I went back and I wanted to listen to those press conferences during those times, and I went back and I listened to the press conference after the October scenario when Joe Douglas didn't have to address the media, but there was so much, drama and, leaking from the front office coming out, and he felt that he needed to address the media and address the people, and speak his mind and explain his side of what was going on within the front office. So listened to a lot of the things that Joe said and went back and I kind of watched the timeline of what Jamal was saying and everything like that. And I kind of put that back out there on Twitter because there was a lot of people that were under the impression, like you had alluded to before, and we talked about this weeks ago, if not months ago. Everybody took Joe Douglas's statement as this was going to happen like right here and now before the 2020 season, and it was only Jamal was the one that said that in one of his last interviews after Week 17. You know, Jamal was the one that was expecting the deal to be done before the 2020 season. And then when Rich Cimini asked him about that in the offseason, he said, my status hasn't changed. The goal is to make Jamal a Jet for life. But, you know, he was pressed. And they said, are you going to do that now? Are you going to do that later? And he said, I'm focusing on the draft and I'm focusing on this and that. And, you know, when that time comes, I'll talk to Jamal's people and, you know, you guys will know when I know, and more or less so. But, really, really intriguing to see how this whole thing's unfolding, and I'm sure more information as the weeks go by are probably going to come out because we know one thing about Jamal Adams, he loves to run his mouth, and I'm sure he's probably going to be, you know, throwing more dirt our way before it's all said and done, and, you know, we'll have to deal with that when that comes too. But, yeah, you know, hearing your news that you're telling me now about the way he conducted himself last year, that's pretty deceitful is what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, that was, like I said, that was per Ian Rappaport. He said, teammates apparently knew
and
about
Ian
it.
doesn't come out with stuff like that unless if he's sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. If he's and something like that is, you know, if that were not true, that would kind of be slander. You're
right.
Really trashing a guy's reputation if he didn't do that. So I think it's completely
and Jamal
believable.
would be the first one to say, I didn't say that.
Which I think he said. I think he tweeted. There's been a lot of stuff said about me today that's not true. But again, that's some pretty harsh stuff to because obviously again that would come from the Jets. Pardon me, that would come from the Jets. I think it's believable. We know listen, he made videos of himself this offseason saying he's trying to get traded to Dallas. Why would we believe he wasn't trying to do it during the season? You know, it doesn't matter now because it would be water under the bridge, Alex. But I had a thought about a month or so ago when I went back and I was watching Ryan Clark, one of Jamal's friends on ESPN, who he went to ask him. He said, you know, go when you're on the air tonight, you know, announce that I want to be a Cowboy. And this was at the trade deadline as well. Because and I said this at the time. I wrote an article saying it. Players are savvy. This stuff doesn't happen by accident. You don't accidentally go on the air and happen to mention that your friend who is currently in the league, who you spoke to earlier tonight, would like to go play for Team X. That doesn't happen without a guy saying, hey, man, you know, mention this tonight on the air. But it made me wonder. I wondered aloud about, I think it was about a month ago, because when I went back and watched, I'd forgotten, if you recall, Alex, I think the day after when no trade happened, same guy, Ryan Clark, Jamal's buddy, doing some of his bidding for him, went on ESPN, one of their morning shows, and said the Jets need to be making some phone calls to try to trade Sam Darnold. That Jamal Adams works too hard to trade. If the Jets are going to trade anybody, it needs to be Sam Darnold. So I can't help but wonder if there was a little bit of jealousy there on Jamal's part, with Sam being, you know, really those two guys were the face of the franchise, which was kind of ideal. One guy on offense, one guy on defense, both young guys that you want to build around. And all of a sudden, Jamal has his buddy go on TV to say, trade me. And then when that doesn't happen, his buddy comes on TV the next day and says they need to trade Sam Darnold. You know, what kind of idiot says you trade a 22-year-old quarterback in the middle of his second season, having just come back from mono? You've got to be a complete maniac. But I don't know. It's purely speculative on my part, of course. But, boy, that would be one heck of a coincidence if Ryan Clark was repeating what Jamal Adams wanted him to say one day, and then, you know, not 24 hours later saying that the Jets should trade Sam Darnold. And I looked it up, by the way, Alex. The last time, at least as far as I can see, I may have missed one, last time Ozzie Newsome took a safety in the first round was 7 years ago, 2013, with the 32nd pick. And other than that, I'm back at 2012, no other safeties in the top 3 picks, not even the top 4 picks. It's just not something that Baltimore does. It's not a position they value. So, as I said on the show last week or a few weeks ago, because everyone kept saying Joe Douglas said, and I just kind of said, is there a chance he's just saying it and he doesn't mean it? I don't know, something about Jamal's reported asking price, which was said to be between 17 and 20 million. I just thought, I don't think Joe Douglas is going to want to do this. And we said, Alex, what did you say? I know when we talked about, it might have been after the Dallas thing, after he said, I'm trying to get traded there. I think I said I put the chances of him getting traded at 80% at that point. And that was before he went scorched earth and went to the Daily News and said Gase is incompetent and Douglas is a liar. So for people who think that a player is going to be able to say all that and still not get traded, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what the other thing is, that I want to add to that, which is kind of, who knows how you're going to take it, but not really seeing too many players kind of being vocal and, wishing him luck or, things like that. Like I know some people communicate with him on Instagram, but, normally Twitter's kind of where the main hub is for some of the Jets information and the drama, but not really seeing a lot of people, besides Le'Veon Bell, which is something that maybe we can talk about too, because it looks like they had a little rift as well. But not a lot of people went out there and said, "Hey, man, best of luck, this and that, go do you, love,
we didn't see the outpouring.
So,
we didn't see the outpouring of support.
That now maybe some of these guys are like, you know what, we're going to still be great without you. That's the new challenge. And that's what I kind of feel like this mentality is going to be, because I know that the narrative is going to be with some of the guys in the media, can the Jets defense still be good without 33? And, my opinion is we still got Greg Williams in-house. And as long as that guy's calling the shots and drawing up the scheme, I'm confident that this defense is still going to be great. Would it be better with Jamal Adams? Absolutely. But I still feel confident that, Greg Williams is going to figure out a way to work with some of these young, hungry players and still be dominant like we were down the, second half of the year.
Yeah, and the other thing, Alex, I meant to mention was the drafting of Ashton Davis. Taking a safety in the third round. And I'll say, on the moment that pick was announced, I was pissed off. I wanted to throw something. I thought the last thing this team needs is a safety. Even if he is going to replace Marcus May, that's next year. Get a safety next year. Get a free agent safety. And everything I was reading, because as I said, I was 100% honest. I said I did no homework on safeties this year. In my mind, they weren't taking a safety in any round at any point. So I knew very little. I knew nothing about Ashton Davis coming into the draft. And I start reading the scouting reports after they draft him just to kind of get an idea. And it's a lot of talk about, center fielder this, center fielder that. But then I watch a couple of his games, and he played a fair bit around the line of scrimmage. Not the way Jamal did, but I'm watching him make plays around the line of scrimmage, deep down the field, covering a ton of ground from a deep safety spot to come up and make plays on the ball. And I'm just watching and thinking, no, this guy doesn't have the same thud that Jamal has. Jamal's probably got an extra 10, 12 pounds of muscle, where he's going to make his presence felt a lot more than Ashton Davis is. But I still looked at it and thought, this guy might be able to do some of the things Jamal can do. And now the trade of Jamal makes me think it even more so about, did Joe Douglas really think he was going to keep Jamal Adams as much as he said it? And, and the timing of it, and we mentioned that. I'd mentioned that. You'd mentioned it. And you said it, earlier. Jamal was the only one saying that the deal was supposed to happen now. Joe Douglas never once said, I'm going to get him signed long term and it's going to happen Joe Douglas actually said what I suggested the Jets may have been thinking, which was let's do free agency, let's do the draft, and then we'll address Jamal. Well, between, once the draft hit and you start signing your rookies or looking to get them signed, all of a sudden COVID hits and they tell you the cap might drop $70 million. So things change pretty dramatically. And I mean, I think we've covered it enough, really. What's that?
The budget, apparently, from, I think it was Manish who had put out that story, that Chris Johnson gave a tight budget and, put the choke collar on Joe Douglas on how much money he could throw at certain players. So, he was a little handicapped, or handcuffed, I should say, on how much money he could spend. And theoretically, Joe Douglas did extend Jamal Adams by picking up his fifth-year option on his rookie contract. So, you can we can go back and forth with this on who was right, who was wrong, and who did what, who didn't. But, Joe probably could say, I picked up your option. I told him that we were going to work on something. I didn't tell him when, and not knowing what the future holds, why is this, all of a sudden become all about Jamal and it's not about the team? And he said that I want players that want to be here. I want guys in the right mindset that are going to, be positive and help this team go after the ultimate goal, which is a Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, listen, I think we've spent enough time talking about Jamal. He's gone. Just as I said, wanted to get your opinion because you weren't, you were on your way out when that deal went down. And just, I knew you'd want to have your say. The guy's gone. The Jets now are in position. I mean, Alex, I don't know about you, but I'm, training camp open and I'm already peeking at the draft prospects because hold on to your hats. I don't think the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yep.
So, again, looking at how tough the schedule is, my personal lack of faith in Adam Gase, I'm looking at this like it's a 5 or 6 win season, but this team's got 10 picks and 5 in the top 100. And I'll tell you what, Alex, I know I shot you a tweet the other day or shot you a message the other day. No updates as of yet, folks. But for those of you who missed it a week or two ago, Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russ Wilson did indicate that he had some concerns about COVID with his wife being pregnant. She has since given birth. She has a baby at home, and I know at least one player yesterday opted out for the season. Was it Hightower? I forget who. Somebody who opted out for the year opted out because he's
dropping like flies.
They are.
I think
but someone opted out.
Was another one. It was a big one.
Yeah, Patrick Chung. Yeah, Cannon, the O lineman, was another. But Russell Wilson had indicated that he had some concerns because his wife just had a baby, and implications with COVID and kids is mortality rate's extremely low, but no one knows the long-term effects, this, that, and the other. Could you imagine, Alex, if Russ Wilson announced tomorrow? Players have up to 7 days to announce their intentions to opt out. Can you imagine if in the next 4, 5, 6 days Russ Wilson says, I'm not playing this year? The Seahawks would flip that. They will have given up a top 5 pick. Well, top 10 at worst, if not top 5. The Jets could be sitting there with with pick 8 and pick 14 come draft time. I mean, that's getting way ahead of ourselves. But could you imagine that, Alex, if Russell Wilson says, going to do what's right for my family?
Who the quarterback would be?
Geno.
Our old buddy Geno Smith.
Geno Smith, a legend in his own mind. Oh, my God. How great would it be if Geno Smith delivered a top 5 pick? What's that?
I side with all these players. We know nothing about their families. We know nothing about their genetics and their history, and in their circle, who could be, one of the people that are at risk due to health concerns. So we really, really can't just,
absolutely.
say anything bad about these guys. I saw Marquise Goodwin yesterday getting a little bit of slack, and I thought that was a little uncalled for, but that's what people do on social media behind their keyboards. But
listen,
we don't know these guys' walk of life and what they have to deal with and what's in their inner circle. And at this point, family's first. And if Russell Wilson feels that it's the best thing for him to do to not risk his family and not risk his the new baby that he's had, and clearly this guy has made a lot of money. He's been to a couple Super Bowls. I mean, why take the risk, in my opinion? So it's an interesting thing. If that happens, it'll kind of be a little bit of karma on Jamal, because Joe Douglas did him a solid and sent him to one of the places apparently that he was comfortable going to as well. So there's that too.
Yeah, listen, if you're giving any player a hard time on social media about them not taking part because of COVID, just go away. Go away.
Go scrub your toilet. Do something productive.
All of your social media accounts, just shut them down. Go read a book. Listen, and I said this the other day, that we don't know, and I'm surprised it hasn't been talked about more, Alex, and I saw it finally tweeted out yesterday by an ESPN reporter, but the way she did it, was somewhat misleading. Basically, my point was, for offensive linemen, especially offensive linemen, they tend to be your bigger fellows, and some of your interior D linemen. Obesity is a huge factor in the mortality rate for this thing. It's basically an underlying condition. You can say, I'm a 28-year-old guy, I have no conditions, I don't have diabetes, I don't have heart disease, I don't have this. If you have obesity, you have something in terms of underlying conditions. That is a huge factor in mortality. However, the first time I saw it really acknowledged or addressed yesterday, I forget the name of the reporter. I only saw it because someone else I know commented on it. I don't follow the reporter myself. But she said over 70% of NFL players have a BMI that would put them at risk. To which I think that's kind of playing with the numbers a little bit, because to me, BMI doesn't mean you're fat. And I'm sure NFL guys, just based on their muscle mass, are way over in terms of if you just look at, height and weight. There are guys who are at a weight that if it's the average, Joe Blow, they're like, 34% body fat. Whereas you can have a BMI that's high and a body fat that's low if you're just, built like some of these animals are. These guys are freaking, like J.J. Watt. Like, if you look at his height and weight, he's probably borderline obese, but the guy's not fat. So it's the sort of the obese, unhealthy. At least, again, I actually spoke with my doctor about COVID stuff, and I'm overweight as hell. So my doctor told me, I was like, hey, this is back when I thought I might have had it. And I was like, I'm worried because I have hypertension. He was like, dude, I'm more worried about you being big than I'm worried about your hypertension. And he said to me, my wife's working in an ICU right now. This people is killing fat men. Like, fat dudes are like one of the biggest demos that are killing, who are dying of this. So I think the BMI number is a little bit misleading, but at the same time, there are going to be some guys in the league who are classed as obese. And remember, you double down on that when you talk about being African American. They're saying that it's as I said, it's killing fat guys, but it's killing elderly, it's killing people with underlying conditions, and black people are not doing well with this disease. So if you're overweight and you're a black guy and you're playing in the NFL, I have no problem with anybody opting out, but especially people who are, looking at 2 or 3 different factors where the mortality rate, because the mortality rate, Alex, among the general public for people who aren't ill and who are under 40 years old is 0.2%. It's damn near nil. So I get that if you're a young healthy dude and you want to play, but if you have some issues, guys in the league are diabetic. There are guys in the league. You better believe there's some guys in the league with high blood pressure. So, and there, I'm sure, as you mentioned, family. We don't know what their family background is. We don't know who lives at home with them.
Yep.
So judging these guys based on that stuff, on not playing, is absolutely nuts, in my opinion. I think you got to draw a line somewhere and realize that, these guys have to put their families first. And Alex, you shot me a tweet right before we went on the air. What was that about? Go ahead and break that down for us.
Yeah. So we saw some reports come out today on Twitter with a couple of Jets yesterday and today opting out due to possible COVID situations here. And Leo K, and I cannot pronounce his last name. It's a long one and it's a mouthful, but he was a depth guy. He decided, going to skip this year and be safe. As we know, Ahmad Gooden, also went on the reserve/COVID list, and Jalen Moore, UDFA Appalachian State, a guy I pounded the table for that I was kind of hoping would make the roster this year. Looks like the injuries have just kind of weighed down on this guy too long, and he's walking away from the game. So, there's just a couple people right there. Also, Shaheem Carter, a UDFA that we had talked about, a bubble guy, little versatility, playing inside as a defensive back and little safety play as well. Looks like he's going on the COVID-19 IR list. And then something shocking, as I was going through Instagram, I saw a couple posts from Jordan Jenkins, and he put a little screenshot out there saying COVID tests 1 and 2, 1 negative for COVID, 2 positive for antibodies. And then he follows up with an update. I had the symptoms back in February when I was in Aspen. When I came back, I couldn't taste or smell for about a week and a half. And that is one of the indicators that they have said that if you are exposed, that your smell and your taste are affected during this. So Jordan Jenkins more or less saying that, he may not have been crazy sick, but it looks like he might have had it, and now he has the antibodies. So
yeah, and that's
quite interesting to see how that's going to unfold. Haven't really seen any breaking news on that, but I do see we have a caller coming in here as well.
Yeah, that's going to be Kristian Dyer from Sports Illustrated calling in. I believe it is. Let's see. Kristian, is that you?
It is.
How are we doing, Kristian?
And all of a sudden, everyone begins clicking off the show as soon as they hear my voice.
Oh, Kristian, no more than 60% of the audience.
Well, listen, after I did the 2-hour draft show a couple weeks ago, you guys owe me one.
Much appreciated, Kristian, as always.
Nice.
So, by the way, that's Leo Kolomatangi, I believe, is the pronunciation there, Alex. The center from Hawaii who was on the active roster for 7 weeks to wrap up last season, had a chance to catch on as a depth piece this year. Better run blocker than pass blocker, but he is going to sit out the season. And again, to me, you can't question these guys doing that. Kristian, what are your thoughts on people who are criticizing players who are opting out due to COVID? And break down for us, if you would. You had an excellent article today. I just broke it down a little bit on the JetNation.com front page on the Football Outsiders and their projections for Jets wins. And tell us, Kristian, what happened to their projected win total for the Jets when Jamal Adams was traded to the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, well, let's talk COVID-19 first so we can get that out of the way and begin talking about the stuff that is a little bit of a distraction, right? I mean, people have been going through so much, and, we're all over the world in terms of where this conversation is taking place and people who are listening. And at the end of the day, we pray for health and we try to do the right things. And, I was talking with the Jets player a couple days ago over the weekend, and we were just talking about COVID and a couple things, and he said, I'm loading up on my blueberries, I'm eating my elderberries, I'm making sure I get more vitamin C, I'm out in the sun more, I'm doing vitamin D, and I mean, those are all things that I've been doing, and I'm sure everyone's been kind of adjusting their diet and their nutritional intake and their programming in different ways. So when you hear of Hightower opting out and Chung on the Patriots and Nate Solder with the Giants, and the names we've heard, the one name with the Jets so far. I think there has to be some understanding that these guys are certainly giving up some things to play the game of football, and we ask them to risk, to a certain extent, life and limb so that we can cheer and we can have a distraction 16 times a year and hopefully 17, 18, 19, 20 times a year as well for teams that go into the playoffs. So I don't think that anyone, especially we've heard so many of these players have young families, there may be health concerns in the family, or just simply don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, should have the right to do this. And I don't think they should be criticized for it, nor do I think that they should pressure other players, and this is a very personal decision, much like retirement, much like playing the game is. And I think for the most part it's been handled well. I think the Jets should probably be applauded and commended for kind of pushing back on the testing to make sure that everything was right inside their facility, that they were able to do it the right way, not rushing into things. We've seen what rushing into things has done on both ends of the spectrum here in this debate in the country. So that's a very long answer to say I don't think that anyone should be necessarily ostracized or raked over the coals for something that's a very personal decision about health. And we also don't know what type of family pressures some of these individual players may be feeling. And I'm sure a number of them are probably angering family members, whether it's a spouse or a parent of some sort who may not want them to play, but they feel the urge because of finances or limited opportunities or career trajectory that they need to be on the field this year. To answer now the second question, which is a complete 180 from what we were just talking about, maybe that's a good thing. I had the opportunity to talk with some people over at Football Outsiders, which if you haven't signed up for the Almanac, go out there and get it. Buy it off Amazon. Make sure that it is part of what you have for your preseason reading. We don't have preseason games to distract us this year, so set aside that time. It's always a great resource. And I just asked them about the projections of what the Jamal Adams trade does in terms of the outlook for the Jets season. And Football Outsiders is one of those websites and resources that's more spot on than most in terms of projections and analytics. They were the first one to really develop it in the game of football, and they've really perfected it. And they had the Jets originally pegged at 7.4 wins. Now, they tend to be very conservative. There's not a huge range of teams with 3 wins and then a team with 13 or 14. Most teams are clustered right around 500. But at the end of the day, they had the Jets at 7.4 wins. And then with Jamal Adams, I thought, well, you're trading away your best player. We're hearing a lot of doom and gloom. Well, what is this going to be? 6.4 wins? Are they going to lose one full game? Is it going to be 5.4? Given how instrumental and impactful Adams was for the Jets last year. And they said, nope, it goes from 7.4 wins to 7.2. The Seahawks go from, I believe it was 8.2 to 8.4. They already had the Seahawks as the top team in the NFC West. So I was a little surprised by that. But then at the end of the day, I also think that this Jets team is better than people are giving them credit for. I think it's a more balanced team. If you look at the fact that this team was 7-9 a year ago, and I think they've improved considerably on the offensive line. It's not elite, but it's certainly a serviceable offensive line. I think you can make the argument at wide receiver, they did a like-for-like with Rashad Perryman replacing Robbie Anderson. I think you can say Denzel Mims is going to be an upgrade, a third wide receiver over anyone they'd be able to trot out there consistently. I think the defensive side of the ball, with the exception of the Adams move, is back for another year. Greg Williams has shown that he's resilient when he loses half of his starting 11 week in, week out due to injuries or suspensions. The return of Mosley is going to be big. So I think there's a lot of reasons why this Jets roster is better and deeper. Now, they have a tougher schedule, and I've always argued that the team may be better, but the record might be a little bit worse this year. But at the end of the day, Football Outsiders kind of backs up what Adam Gase and Joe Douglas are saying, is that this team may be marginally worse, but we're not looking at a situation where they're going to go 0-16 either, at least according to the projections.
Yeah, and I think part of what, as you'd mentioned, or what they said was the fact that they got a starting player back who plays that position obviously offsets the loss. It's not as if they just they got rid of a starting player and now have a black hole there without a starting, without a proven player to step in that spot. So that's obviously, I see where they're coming from, and I agree with what you're saying, Kristian, because I've said it a few times this offseason that this could be one of those cases where the talent on a roster gets better, but the record doesn't necessarily do the same. If you look at last year's schedule, as we've discussed previously, they didn't go any far. Their longest road trip was Washington, or that's as far west as they went. They didn't leave the East Coast. Much different story this year. They have some long road trips. I know at one point Joe Douglas put in the request they're going to stay out west and play back-to-back games on the West Coast. I think tougher schedule, more travel could offset some of the improvements they made. But what do you think, Kristian, your expectations for, and we'll let you go after this. We just want to get your thoughts. Year 3 of Sam Darnold, as you said, with the improved weapons. Of course, if Chris Herndon is back healthy, I've said I think that's the biggest factor on offense for this team outside of the O-line. What do you expect from Darnold in year 3?
Yeah, well, I think this is a team where you look at the basement, and I'm probably going to get in some trouble for this, but when you look at the basement in terms of win total, I think the basement's 5 wins. That's, if they run up against kind of a murderer's row towards the second half of the year in terms of the schedule. 3 trips out to the West Coast, the back-to-back weeks out in the West Coast certainly can make for a challenge. Unusual with the way the Dolphins are set up, sandwiching either into the bye. It was not a favorable schedule for the Jets by any stretch. But at the end of the day, I do think that there are some winnable games out there. I think Miami's an improved team, but I think the Jets are an improved team too. I think that they can get a win or two here in the division more than they've been getting the past few years. There are some vulnerable teams out there, and the Jets had just about as much bad luck as a team could have in 2019 and still went 7-9. They won a lot of games against some cream puffs in the second half of the season, but they also lost some games early on in the year. You look at week 1 and how that was a winnable game against a Buffalo Bills team that ended up going to the playoffs and is now projected to be the favorites in the division. So I do think that it's feasible to think this team could be 6-7 wins if things break the right way and Darnold progresses. I think there's potential there to be an 8-win team. I don't see them being a 9-win team necessarily. I think that window is kind of between 5 to 8 wins realistically. And I'm always one of those that if your team's not going to make the playoffs, you root for the lower so you can get the better draft pick, because that can go a long way towards the rebuild. And, if Sam Darnold is able to do what he's supposed to do and take that next step and be steady, I'm not sure if anyone expects him with the weapons that he has and an offensive line that's still very much growing, developing an influx, if he's going to take this massive leap and become a tier 2 quarterback. But if he can be a steady quarterback who continues to cut down on turnovers, another year in the offense, if he can show something, a step forward from what he did. I'm not saying even the second half of the year when he was lights out against that lighter schedule, but kind of a blend between what the first half of the year was and the second half of the year, and show that consistently against a very tough schedule. I think it's you've got some good building blocks there, and I think you also have something you can sell to free agents too. Darnold is young. He's one of the, I believe he is the youngest third-year quarterback in the league. I tried to run some rough numbers on that, and I'm not 100% sure, but that's certainly a selling point when you look at the fact that by age he should probably be entering year 2. By age, he could well be a rookie as well, given
Absolutely.
that a lot of college quarterbacks coming out are spend a 5th year. They go off and graduate.
I think he's still the youngest quarterback in the division, if I'm not mistaken.
He is, assuming that Tua does not start week 1. He would be the youngest quarterback in the division. So there's a lot of reasons to think that this year is really about setting up for 2021, when you're going to have more cap space, potentially another pick in or around the top 10, that second pick in the first round, another pick in the third round. It gives a lot of chances to be flexible. I think the Jets, if they go 6-10, but they're in every game and they're not getting blown out, and you don't have the situations like you did with the Patriots at home, where you just kind of get the sense that the team doesn't have talent. I think you got a real sense that this team could be ready to build and take off in 2021 in terms of being ready to be a playoff contender.
All right, that is Kristian Dyer from Sports Illustrated. Kristian, thanks so much for joining us as usual.
Take care, guys. Everyone be safe, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Kristian. Be well, bud.
Take care.
All right, so Alex, we're not going to get too big. We're not going to get too big into predictions, but some of Kristian's comments got me thinking about having said earlier.
Touchy comment there, talking about Sam Darnold these days.
What's that? No, listen, I don't. A lot of people are down on Sam Darnold. A lot of people are, he needs to show this, he needs to show that, and everybody's talking about him like he's a guy who's played behind the same offensive line that Mark Sanchez had when he used to have 15 minutes to make a throw. The film shows it, the numbers show it. I believe he was pressured on 42% of his dropbacks, which was number one in the NFL. So you combine more pressure than any quarterback in the NFL with less than adequate weapons, and the kid throws 14 touchdowns and 5 interceptions over the last 7-8 games of the year, and people are like, this guy might be the problem. We might need a new quarterback. I already see, thank God we got these picks with Jamal. Now we can trade up and draft a quarterback. I think people sometimes, I don't know if it's the fantasy football effect. If I can draft a guy, if I can draft a guy who can throw 48 touchdowns, then that must mean Darnold sucks. Whether it's the fantasy football thing, or people are just looking at stats in a vacuum as if every single guy has the same blocking and the same scheme and the same receivers. It's just not the case. And
his
you look at the numbers,
rating isn't that good. So
exactly. Well, there you go. That's about as scientific.
That trumps overall.
That's as scientific as it gets right there. I know that he. I looked it up a couple weeks ago. Among the quarterbacks, he was top 10 in the NFL in in adjusted completion percentage per PFF, which basically adjusted completion percentage. They take out your throwaways, they count your drop passes as completions, things like that. Basically, how often was the ball on target and on time? And for Sam Darnold, he was 9th in the NFL, despite the fact that he was pressured more than any quarterback in the league. So people who are giving up on this kid because his supporting cast has been atrocious, coaching has been questionable, and that was my thing, Alex, with saying earlier that I'm saying 5 or 6 wins for this team. And I did tweet this out a few weeks ago, maybe even a couple months ago, I don't even remember anymore, that the one thing that makes me think this team could, as Kristian said, Kristian said he thinks the ceiling is 8 wins. I wouldn't disagree with that. If we're going to say floor ceiling, I would say between 5 and 9 wins, only because it's going to come down to Greg Williams. Because as good as the defense was last year, if he gets Williamson and Mosley back, and that defense is at least, top 10, let's say, with the tougher schedule, if you feel the top 10 defense and the offensive line has been solidified, again, not great, and we don't know for sure, assuming that Becton is at least adequate, by adding McGovern, by adding Becton, and Fant and Adoga will battle it out for a job. The O-line, there's no reason it shouldn't be middle of the pack and hopefully trending toward top of the pack. But if you have a middle of the pack O-line, that's a lot more time for Sam Darnold. That's hopefully Chris Herndon returning healthy and a Greg Williams defense. If they finish in the top 10, then listen, 8-9 wins isn't out of the question if that happens. But the reason I'm saying 5 or 6, and that's today. We'll do a prediction show before the season starts. I'm saying 5 or 6 because I just can't see the Jets catching as many breaks. Not even catching breaks so much as just nothing going catastrophically wrong in terms of injuries and things like that. But we got a couple seconds left, Alex. What are your thoughts on that in terms of, where do you see, sitting here today? What's the floor for this team? What's the ceiling? And what are some of the bigger factors? And we'll, at a later show, sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll do a deep dive on this stuff, on expectations for players and position groups and records and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about this, the effects of Jamal Adams and things like that, I was saying the ceiling for this team would be 9 wins with Jamal Adams on here. Without Jamal Adams, maybe the ceiling's more towards 7. We might be looking at a 6-10 season. So right now I'm probably right around the 6 to 7 area, and if all the stars align, and something that I'd like to get into, as we get closer to week 1, talking about how quickly can this offensive line gel, and how quickly can they come together and work together as a unit? Because last year, as we talked about at length, a lot of the problems were up front in the trenches. So these guys don't have preseason games to work out their kinks and things like that, and now it's really, really going to be important for these guys to get those mental reps and communicate with each other, because we saw a lot of struggles on the offensive line with communication and things like that last year. And plus, looking at it, we have one legit starter in McGovern, some potential in a mammoth of a man and a rookie tackle in Becton. And then the other 3 spots, the 2 guards and the right tackle, were really unsure. Fant has been primarily a backup, but we're assuming he's going to start at right tackle. Brian Winters is still on the team, so we know how that goes. But I will say this, I am more confident with the second tier of our offensive line than I was last year. Because we do have bodies in there. Cameron Clark, I think, is about potential. So I'm a little concerned with the offensive line. And for you, you were saying that the big factor now is going to be Greg Williams with Jamal Adams being gone. I definitely agree with that, but I also feel that this team's success will be heavily on what can the offense do. Can we get Le'Veon Bell back to that 2017 form? He's in great shape. He's busting his hump every day. I think he's in a place to where now, since he had such a down year, now he wants to prove to himself and prove to everybody that he can be back to that elite level. So take the good with the bad, I guess you could say here. I'm excited to see what he has in store for us. And how quickly can Adam Gase get this offense rolling? Sam feels more confident going into year 2 of the same program. So those are good positive things. But, this new pandemic world that we live in has changed a lot as far as these guys not being able to, do the OTAs and working out and doing the kinks and all that crap. So right now my prediction is not very high. I'd have them as below 500 at this point in time, but we don't know what the rosters are going to look like come week 8 and beyond that. As we know, with this virus, things are going to change. Guys are going to get sick, just like we've seen with the MLB and the Marlins, and for an example, and anything can change. And by week, these rosters are going to be adjusted. So today, I could see them pulling out 7 wins with a max potential of 9. But obviously, things go south. That you could be more toward where you were saying, that 5 to 6 margin.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw it today. I think it was Bob Wischusen sent out a string of tweets, off topic somewhat, but in terms of the COVID thing and what's going on with the Marlins. That was apparently the players were going out clubbing when they weren't playing baseball. So, Bob Wischusen was bringing up the point. These guys aren't getting COVID because they're playing sports. they're getting COVID because of what they're doing when they aren't playing sports. So, interesting take there. So we'll see what happens. Before we go, JetNation Radio would like to thank our sponsor, Mile Social, for help running all the different platforms for your social media platforms for your business. Check out milesocial.com. That's MILE social.com. Whether it's your Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it may be, Mile Social has got you covered. Again, that's milesocial.com, MILE social.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Alex, great having you back on, and we look forward to catching you next week, JetNation.
Likewise. And thank you, Kristian Dyer, for giving us your time. And everyone at JetNation, have a good night. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at JetNation Radio. Glenn is at AceFan23, and Alex is at NYJetsLife24. Until next time, go Jets!